Focus is a lot more than just a design for your WordPress website. In fact, it is a design system, and that's what makes it so special. And what I want to do in this video is run you through kind of just the basics behind the Focus design system and really show you what a design system is and how it can work for you and how it's going to make your site faster, easier to maintain, and it's going to give you a lot more control over your design than you've ever had before. So let's dive in. So the first aspect of the design system is the design itself. And we will take a look at the Focus design here. Here it is. Now this design is totally configurable. You can change the way everything looks, colors. You can change the way this stuff displays. That's sort of a slightly different topic. But it all starts with the design. And what makes this design unique is that it is absolutely streamlined in every way, and it's designed for this new landscape that we all find ourselves in, and that is an environment where mobile devices are getting all the traction. This is where your user growth is coming from. More of your audience is accessing your site on this type of device than ever before, and that means they're using really small screens. So that changes the game. It's no longer this deal with these huge desktop monitors and trying to fill up all this horizontal space. Mobile devices have dictated that this is a top-down medium, a very narrow landscape. This is what we have to work with. This is how we're going to need to communicate with people. And that's precisely how Focus has been designed. Right now we're obviously looking at a desktop view, but I want to switch over and show you this same page and what it's going to look like on a mobile device. Boom, there it is. As you can see, it's essentially the same, it's just narrower. And this is how it's supposed to be. But if you've been around for any length of time and been dealing with WordPress websites for a few years or something like that, then you know the landscape has gone in the other direction. The WordPress ecosystem is awash in these designs that have these big hero images. Images take longer to load on mobile devices and make things slower for mobile customers. So you've got big hero images that span the width of the page. On so many sites now, you've got these. It's very fashionable to have a 1, 2, 3, three elements, positioned horizontally alongside one another to spell out things like product features or things like that. Well, obviously that 1, 2, 3 across doesn't translate very well to mobile screens. The entire effect of certain design elements is completely different between desktop and mobile environments, and I don't particularly see that as a good thing. You ideally want to convey the same feelings and get the same kind of emotional response from users no matter what device they're accessing your site from. And so think about this scenario. You have a user who accesses something on your site on a mobile one time, and then they want to go show their friends or something later, and then they attempt to pull this up on desktop. Well, if your site looks massively different, the effect that brought that person here is not present in a different environment. We see this a lot. This is much more common than you might realize. And that consistency of experience is very key in the long term. And it's key for really connecting with your audience. So if you've got these different feelings and these different connections happening on desktop versus mobile, then you're getting wildly variant results on your website. So it would be better, just from a consistency of presentation standpoint, to have something that's very similar on mobile and very similar on mobile and desktop. But that stuff aside, like, who even cares about that? Let's not even think about users right now, even though it's very, very important. It's a huge part of the equation, is the consistency of the user's experience in interacting with your properties. However, let's just talk about you. Let's talk about you managing your website. If you have wildly different displays between mobile and desktop environments, then you are going to have to manage those differences over time. As you add pieces, maybe you add an e-commerce component, something like that, then you've got to manage the desktop version of this presentation and the mobile version of this presentation. Each one of those decisions implies a ton of overhead, and you need to understand, or you need to be honest with yourself about whether or not you're in a position to control and manage those things. If you're not, then maybe it's not a good idea to choose an operating environment that presents these big differences between mobile and desktop. So that was a long-winded point there, but the idea is that Focus is very much the same and serves a minimum amount of resources no matter whether you're on desktop or mobile. The whole thing has been designed so that this design can be conveyed anywhere, and it requires the minimum amount of resources no matter what kind of device it's viewed on. So that's fundamental principle number one here with the focus design is, that universality. It's going to work everywhere, and it works the same way everywhere. That is a key distinction. So we see that. That's great. And we can look at another page here. Here's a big page with some big expansive images that go across. So that's a cool presentation. But then again, on mobile, all that coolness just shrinks down to one tiny little column, and it all fits in there perfectly, and you didn't have to think about it. You just get that big expansion bonus on when you have more real estate on the screen. But that's great. So this design is absolutely rock solid for conveying your content, which is really the essence of your website. And it makes it so you don't have to manage many things. You're not going to be juggling two different environments, none of that. It is very, very simple, and that is by design. Now let's look, so we're talking about a design system. So a design system starts with a rock solid design foundation. A design that's not going to require a lot of different treatments. No snowflake stuff like, oh, we do this for desktop, we do this for mobile. No, 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 no. We do one thing, we do it perfectly, and we do it the same way every time. That is, part one. That's the basis for this design system. The next aspect of that, I jumped into the options here, but I got ahead of myself. The next key core piece of this, design system is the typography. Believe it or not, everything about this design is drawn from the typography settings you see here. Specifically, this is known as golden ratio typography. Golden ratio typography is the art of applying the golden ratio to the physical characteristics of your environment, which is namely the font size and the width of the content column here. Applying the golden ratio to the font size and the content column width to determine all spacing, so like line heights, the spacing between paragraphs, the spacing in the layout, spacing underneath this image, around the headline, byline, all that stuff, all the spacing you see, every bit of this, everything in this layout is related through the golden ratio. It's all proportionally done. And that ties everything together in a way that makes it so you can change your design with a lot more power than you ever have before. I want to illustrate this for you. So because all this stuff is tied together, it is possible to create options to manipulate the design, but not just, so here's the way, I'll have to show you how an old system works and then contrast it with the way this design system works. So in a non-system environment, which is pretty much how every other WordPress theme ever has been developed, you might go in and change something like the headline size. You might change this size. Well, if you were to do that, you would change this size only. So let's do that real quick. And again, this is just going to be a little illustration. So I'm going to change this font size to, I think that's too big, we'll say. So I'll crank this down to like 35 pixels, and then I'll make another adjustment here. Okay, well now I've made this smaller, this headline, but I've only made this smaller. I have not made any other adjustments to my design. Okay, I just changed one thing. And if you've ever done this before, what you find out is that suddenly it looks like there's too much white spacing here relative to the size of this text. So the implication here is that other things are going to need to change. You have made one change, but now you need to make other changes to accommodate that, because now the proportionality of everything has been thrown off. And we're aware of this, even if we're not like consciously aware of this and able to speak about it in such specific terms. We have a sense that we have tweaked one thing, but now we might need to tweak some other things to balance everything out after making this change. So this is a common problem that you see with customizations of all types. You change one thing, honestly, you need to change some other things as well to make sure it all works. This is really the beauty of the focus design system. I can go in and change one thing, like the primary font size. We'll make it 24 pixels. We'll make it huge. And we'll go back over here and we'll check it all out. And now, boom, everything has changed to go along with this. The base font size is now 24. The headlines, sub-headlines, all this other white space, everything in this layout has adjusted to maintain proportionality with the variables of the new environment. That is remarkable. There are so many adjustments that go along with this that one thing I just changed actually probably changed over 100 things in the style sheet. I'm not kidding about that. That is a pretty intense deal though. But this is what you get from a design system. You get pure and perfect proportionality. You get a multitude of changes, smart related changes. You don't have to identify these things that are related and then go change them yourself. No, no, no. This stuff is all done for you. It's kind of like magic. But that's because this whole thing is based on, it's a design system. It is not just a design. It's not little tidbits for you to customize. You're not customizing endpoint nodes here. You're changing the variables of the system, and the entire system reacts to accommodate those changes. So let's dive back in here. So Focus gives you lots of options that are similar to that. You can set up fonts for use. You can set up the base colors that get used in your layout. And then some other stuff like the actual dimensions of the layout itself. And then you've got specific tweaks down below. You can change, you can change everything. You can change background colors, text colors, font sizes of various elements, all this stuff. And you can customize, your exact environment however you want. And I explain this in much greater detail in some of the documentation videos for Focus. But suffice it to say, you have a level of control here that is absolutely unprecedented. And not only that, it's smart. So you don't have to be a design expert. You don't have to know CSS. You don't have to be familiar with any of this stuff. But you're probably familiar with the intuitive concepts of color and wanting to change fonts and all that stuff. Well, now you are empowered to make those changes, and all the other little technical stuff that you really need to be a pro to do automatically gets adjusted for you. So now you don't need a designer or someone to come in and do this extremely tedious work of making everything just right. And by the way, there's no guarantees that anyone's going to do that correctly. It is very challenging to do. Much, much better and much more accurate to use a system to achieve such complex outcomes. Focus sets you up to be able to do this in a way that no other system can. Let's take it a step further. So you've got your basic design options here, and you can achieve a very high level of customization just through this interface alone. But there's going to be plenty of things that you're going to want to do with your website possibly that cannot be accommodated through this panel alone. Focus has a ton of forethought into this exact scenario and totally has you covered here, and in a way that is going to make the entire Focus ecosystem and community benefit from this great patternized structure that we have in the Focus design system. Specifically, you see these values right here, like this one's F5 with a $sign in front. Any of these with a $sign in front. Font 1, font 2, font 3. What these are design variables. And these design variables, you can access them in custom CSS that you might be applying to your website. And again, this is not something you necessarily need to do yourself. You could have a designer write custom CSS for you, or the Focus community can provide you with CSS, custom CSS, that you can copy and paste in here, hit save, and be done with it. So even if it looks codey, there's some CSS code that's going to go in here is what it is. Even if it looks a little bit intimidating, it's not. This is an easy way to be able to accommodate more complex customizations. That's the best way to think about it. Now, I will hide my beautiful face here so I can show you exactly what this can do. So I said we set up some design variables there on the other design options panel. Well, now these variables get conveyed over here, and then you can deploy them in your custom CSS. Now, the question is, why might you want to do something like that? The reason you want to use variables in your custom CSS and not specific values like body font size 16 pixels, this process is known as hard coding. When you write a specific value in a style sheet like this, which is what every designer and developer does who's not using a design system like this, when you do this, you've set up a hard-coded reference, and that means when anything else in your design changes, this value is going to stay the same, which means that proportional tweaking thing I brought up earlier isn't going to apply here. Well, that's not great. Now we've got this like concrete component that does not change. That's not great. It would be better if we used a variable reference here to say that the body font size is going to be F5, which in this case is 18 pixels. And then that way, if we go in and change something in the design options, this will change too, because this variable is going to change. The whole design environment changes when you make changes. And using this construction, this piece of the design system will enable you to make changes that are adaptive. So you can set up this custom CSS, and then you can go into the design panel, which is much more palatable to work with, and make your changes, and the custom stuff is going to change too. That is remarkable. We have never seen an environment in WordPress where customizations can take on this adaptive characteristic before. This is huge. This makes the customization landscape so much smarter and so much more adaptive and so much more portable, and it really serves you way better. Just a quick aside, I work with thousands and thousands of WordPress websites, or I have over the last decade plus. And what I see commonly with sites that have a high degree of customization is a custom CSS file that's a mile long, that's full of all these hard-coded references, multiple references to color values, font sizes, all of this stuff. And that stuff doesn't all change when you make changes to some design panel. In fact, none of that stuff changes. If you want to make any changes to old-style custom CSS that you're going to find everywhere else outside of Focus, you really can't, you got to be an expert to do it, and it's going to take forever. It's tedious, it's time-consuming, it's wasteful. This is a much better operating scenario. This is one of the key fruits that you get from a properly organized design system. And this is a thing that makes Focus super valuable and super powerful. And that's really the meat of the design system. You start with a responsive design, a very smartly designed responsive design that puts performance first. Performance being the key thing you need now on a website. You need speed, especially on mobile devices. Speed is even more important. Google and other search engines have said over the last few years that they champion speed and performance and mobile accessibility above other things. They want to see this. This entire system is designed to provide that. And then when you add this extra layer of customizability and control and organizational, there's organizational benefits here too. Your customizations can be more organized. There's going to be less actual custom code stuff that you need to drag around. Less custom CSS, less custom PHP for very advanced customizations. Just less stuff to consider. Fewer moving parts means a better end result. That is what the Focus Design System is all about, and that's what it's going to bring to your site.